So our last possibility for checkpoint 6 is that you're comparing quantitative to quantitative. To do this, we're going back to check to part 3 of our notes, which is actually nice. Those of you doing quantitative to quantitative, you have the most help and the most time spent on this, so you're in the best shape. So we have 3 things that I'm going to want from you: a scatter plot, a correlation and a p-value for that correlation, and then a conclusion. So in order to do this, let's look at, we already did this one. Remember mom height versus height? So you're going to choose your scatter plot. In this case, you should have a direction that you care about. Okay, so you can blame Kyle. I have no idea where I was, but I'm going to make a scatter plot. Oh, direction, that's what I was talking about. So if you think of one of your variables as more of a response variable to the other, you do want to take that into account when you make your scatter plot. So in the case that we had mom height versus height, it really made more sense that your mom's height might influence your height. So if you have a direction in mind, you should set up your scatter plot that way. There's no reason to do any grouping or coloring unless you are like really overachieving here, but we just want to be able to compare 2 variables. So we're going to go ahead and compute this. So here is your visual display. And I'm going to screenshot this. I'm eating candy now. It was a one happy thing that happened when Kyle stopped by. My coworker opened her door and I got candy. Copy this, throw it into my last slide. Height and mom height. Probably should put those in the other order, but it doesn't matter. And then again, I'm going to move over the text box, throw in this beautiful scatter plot I just took. Now, here I'm not asking you to describe the scatter plot, but if you're doing a presentation, you may want to mention that there looked like there was a positive, linear, moderate relationship between mom height and height. And then we can do our correlation, right? So, previously we talked about what type of tests we ran. So I'm going to do the same thing here. We ran a correlation coefficient. Not truly a test, but whatever. If you're doing things with a correlation coefficient, I do not like how this is turning out, but whatever. You technically have 2 hypotheses. One is there is no linear relationship between height and mom height. And it is important that you have linear in there for our correlation, since correlation can only look at linear, and if we had something that looked parabolic in nature, we may not be able to see that through our hypothesis. And then there, through our correlation coefficient, there is a linear relationship between height and mom height. So those are the 2 competing hypotheses we're going to test with this correlation coefficient. I hate spacing stuff. I hate when we add a space behind stuff. It just drives me bananas. I'm sorry you guys are having to see me go crazy here. I cannot stand it. Oh, it's spacing. Remove space. Thank you. Also, this is gigantic, which is nice for a presentation, but not for what I want. All right, so we ran a correlation coefficient. So then I'm going to come over to stat, summary stats, correlation, and I'm going to choose those 2 variables. I might have to press Control if they're in different areas of my spreadsheet, so I can get both over here. And I'm going to choose to do a 2-sided p-value along with it. So this will tell me whether or not that correlation that I'm getting out is significant. So here is my correlation. Very boring, not a whole lot to screen cap. I don't even need to do a screen cap here. I'm just going to do it to prove that I, in fact, use StatCrunch. So we can take this into my slide. Oop, so small. Let's make that bigger. All right. And then I'm going to put my conclusion in here. So, based on this, and again, I've been doing this on all the other ones, is sort of putting what the statistical decision was, even though I didn't need it. I'll go ahead and do that again, just for shits and giggles. So, add a text box. That's a really small p-value, so we will reject the null. Let me change that to my cute little font and make it red. Boom. And if we reject the null, that means our conclusion is going to start with, there is enough evidence to conclude there is a linear relationship between mom height and height. Right? Order doesn't really matter for correlation in terms of writing this out. Now, if I wanted to be even classier here, I can do more. For those of you doing this quantitative versus quantitative, again, I could actually see what that direction is, that linear relationship. I could say it's moderate and positive, because I know that from looking at my correlation coefficient here. Alternatively, another thing I could do, again, if you're overachieving on this, is you could go ahead and do linear regression. And you could look at how mom height influences height, right? If you wanted to be really an overachiever here. And you could even interpret that slope. For every 1 inch increase in a mom's height, a student's height will increase by 64 inches. So you have more than you could do if you really wanted to overachieve. But this is the bare minimum. We have run it. We have gotten a nice display. We have run an appropriate test. And we've written a conclusion and context about what that test told us. So that's quantitative versus quantitative. And I went through the other ones. So hopefully that helps us all out with slide 11. And I got one more video to make on what our presentation should include.